and welcome to my channel. Did you know that we all have a gift that we can offer to God? And when we bring it to Him, it is never wasted. We're going to talk about it in today's video. Let's go. Hello, it's that Sunday School Girl of thatsundayschoolgirl.com. Welcome to the lesson for Sunday, April 14th. Well, if your week was anything like mine, it was bananas busy, but none of that matters right now because it's our time. This is the space that you and I have created to ensure that we are prepared for class on this Sunday. If you're new around here, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web. There are more than 17,000 people who are just like you, love God, who love His Word, and want to be more effective in our assignments. I'm going to ask everyone to do me a favor. Make sure that you have clicked the subscribe button down below, and that's going to get you connected to this channel. But you'll want to take the second step, which is to click the bell that will pop up. That's the notifications bell, and it's going to send you an email immediately when content is uploaded to this channel. I am believing God that by the end of the year, we're going to see 20,000 or more subscribers. So I need your help in order to make that happen. Here's how you can help me. Share this video or the channel page to your own social media pages. If your class has a page or your church has a page. And don't forget how important word of mouth is. Please tell someone about that Sunday School Girl and help me change the way that people see Sunday school. In the spirit of YouTube and great reviewers who are in this space, I had an amazing encounter this week. It was my pleasure to serve as a delegate in the business session of the Church of God in Christ in Memphis, Tennessee. And under that roof were some other phenomenal YouTubers. I got the opportunity to meet Bishop Glenn and Dr. Pauline Plummer, who are a husband and wife team who have an awesome channel, as well as Pastor Rodney Jones, who is from Chicago, Illinois. If you are not already familiar with their channels, please check them out. It's kind of like the Synoptic Gospels. You're going to get a different review style and maybe pick up some different nuggets, but everyone is sharing some really great content, and they are phenomenal people. Bishop Plummer, congratulations to him, has just been appointed to serve the Church of God in Christ in Israel. So who knows? He may need Sunday school in Israel, and he may call for that Sunday school girl. But in the meantime, before we go to the nations, I want to remind you that you're invited to Texas to visit me here for my first Sunday School Conference, which will take place September 20th and 21st. It is the STEP Summit, Sunday School Teachers Equipped for Purpose. And there are teachers from all over the country who are signed up. I got great encouragement this week, folks, saying that I'm coming. They're going to be here to be in this learning setting. You can learn more about the conference by visiting stepsummit.com. That's with 2 S's.com. And there is all of the registration information and lots of answers to other questions that you may have as you consider if this conference is right for you. In the meantime, it is time for our lesson. Your TSSG notes are down below. It's the first link. Make sure that you got your Bibles, your pens, your commentaries, publishers' books, your own handy-dandy notes. It is time for us to get into the lesson. Our lesson title is Called to Remember. The Bible basis is Matthew chapter 26, verses 1 through 13. The Bible truth. The woman with the alabaster jar performed an act of kindness to Jesus that will be remembered wherever the good news is told. Our memory verse is verse 13. And the lesson aim is that we will contrast the love of the woman with the disciples' response to her actions, appreciate the woman's preparation of Jesus for his coming death and burial, and embrace the call to proclaim the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ despite ridicule or resistance. Have you noticed when studying for a particular week's lesson how things in everyday life tend to jump out at you in different ways? Well, that happened this week through the experiences of two of my friends. Both of their names begin with T, so we'll call them T1 and T2. T1 posted this picture on her social media earlier this week. She arrived at work and saw this box laying on the ground. She noticed it immediately because it was the fragrance that she used to wear in the 90s in high school. And she said it was one of my favorites, and others began to comment, "I remember that fragrance," or "I wore that too." Now, T2's experience was a little bit different. He had recently purchased a bottle of his favorite cologne. but he somehow broke the neck of the bottle, so he purchased a second spray bottle and poured a portion of that cologne into the new spray bottle. But there was still at least a third of the bottle remaining in the original bottle. He stored it in a medicine cabinet, believing that he could come back at another time and continue to refill his second spray bottle. Well, when he returned this week, that cologne had largely evaporated, and he was quite taken aback. He said, "That was one of my favorite colognes, and do you know how much I paid for it?" Well, both of those reminded me of this week's lesson, where we see a fragrant moment that used a costly oil, as we review our lesson in Matthew chapter 26. Our lesson this week brings us to the last moments of the writing of Matthew. It's nearing the time of the end of the life of Jesus. In fact, from this point on, the things happen very quickly. The writing moves very quickly because we're moving toward the time of the death of Jesus Christ. In fact, chapters 26 through 38 are generally referred to as the Passion narrative. And the Passion is really about the suffering which Jesus will endure. And that makes our study appropriate as we approach the Easter season. Our printed text is in Matthew chapter 26, verses 1 through 13. Verse 1 says that it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings that he said unto his disciples, verse 2, "Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified." Starts off by telling us that Jesus is speaking. And I underlined after all these sayings. After all of what sayings? Remember, when you see the word "and," it is the continuation of something. Now, we're not going to review all of the sayings, but just know this. At this point, the hospitality should be bringing Jesus water to drink. He has talked a lot. The previous 3 chapters are largely in red. He's been talking a lot. He knows that his time is coming to an end. He's giving lots of direction. He's having lots of conversation. He's very mindful of how he is using these last days. And here in chapter 26, we know that he is addressing his disciples. For the last few weeks, we've seen this term, disciples, and we've learned that that means that they are people who learn or study from him. They are his students. The word disciple is used 269 times in the New Testament. It really speaks to the fact that we are all called to study and to follow Jesus. These men were basically eternal students. They never, even though in last week's lesson, they were made apostles, they were sent out, but yet they were in a continuous process of learning. My first aha is that you never stop being a follower. There is always something more that we can learn of Jesus. Even as we move and progress and mature in ministry, there is always more that we can learn. There is always an appropriate level of study and fellowship that we should be guilty of having. Jesus knows the time. I said in my notes that he knows what time it is. This is the timing just before his death. He knows that his life will be on the line. He knows exactly what is to take place. And in this context, we do see the sovereignty of God on display. It is the time of the Passover, but Jesus himself is going to be the ultimate Passover sacrifice. It would change what they knew, because ultimately it would be the blood of Jesus Christ that would set men free from sin and death. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Passover. We see in verse 2 that they're making preparation for this festival, for the Passover feast. It was a big time of year. It was an annual time. It was a family time. People looked forward to coming together. We know from the Old Testament that there were 3 feasts. There was the Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles, and all were held in Jerusalem. But we're focused now on the Passover. You can check out Exodus chapter 12 if you want the detailed history on that. But during the Passover, one thing that I thought was important was that they always kept the why in front of the children. They continually reminded every generation of the importance of the Passover. It wasn't just a gathering. It wasn't just an event. It wasn't just a social gathering, but it was a celebration of the deliverance of God when he passed over those homes that had the blood of the Lamb over their doorposts. And again, it was anticipated. The people looked forward to it. There had been many Passover feasts before, but there would never be one like the one one they were going to experience. You know here that Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man, and he lays out what is to happen in the coming days. My aha here was that Jesus knew exactly what was to come, and he willingly proceeds forward from this point. Verses 3 through 5, I grouped together. This is like a change of scenes in a movie. We're now in the home of Caiaphas. And remember, the Passover is a highly festive time. The people who are there have planned to be there. They've worked to be there. It is intentional that they are in the holy city. And here is this group of men in a private meeting in a secluded area. Who are these men? They are chief priests. They are elders, scribes, along with Caiaphas, the high priest. And they are having a problem. They've decided that Jesus has become too much. His notoriety is too much for them. The way they viewed his success is too much. So they are together in this secluded area to discuss, to plot against Jesus, to discuss the plan to kill him. Actually, in verses 3 through 5, there are two distinct groups of people. You've got one group that wants Jesus dead. That's this group meeting in Caiaphas' home. And then there's another group that's simply called the people. Now, the group in Caiaphas' home, they are super religious. They appear religious. They know the law. They know the rules, but they love the law and the rules more than they love people. But even after their discussion, they decide that it was not a good idea to implement their plot at this point. And they did not do it because of the second group. The people who had come to know and love Jesus would have been really upset. They did not want him dead, so they decided not to execute their plan. Now, this was one thing I found interesting. You have this group of men deciding when it would be time for Jesus to die, and then deciding that it's not his time to die. But remember in verses 1 and 2, Jesus has already said of his own, now is the time. So it was never up to a man to decide the time. Again, we see the sovereignty of God. God is always in control of what is going on, and we see that here. Verses 6 and 7, again, is a change of scenes like a movie, and we're now shifting from plotting in a private home to a celebratory dinner. Now, I want to point out here that this is not a chronological sequence of events, nor is it simultaneous. This is somewhat a flashback to a week prior. We know this from the other Gospels. But verses 6 and 7 places Jesus in Bethany. Bethany was the home of Lazarus, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. And he at this time is in the home of Simon the leper. He is there for a meal. It is a dinner that is celebrating Lazarus being raised from the dead. You'll find that in Matthew. This is also the same context where Martha is a bit irritated because she's doing all the work preparing for Jesus to come. And Mary doesn't appear to be working as hard as her sister. Her priorities seem to be different. So you have a working sister and a worshiping sister, and they don't see eye to eye on how they should be serving Jesus. Matthew brings our attention to a woman, but it is in John chapter 12 that we find out this woman is Mary. This is the same Mary who was once a prostitute, and Jesus had forgiven her of her sins. But people were not always as easy or quick to forget. She had been forgiven much, and so she loved much. And she had just seen Jesus raise her brother Lazarus from the dead. So while Jesus is eating, she comes from behind. She breaks open a jar of very costly perfume. This is a fragrant offering. And she gives in proportion to her love and appreciation of Jesus. She does not overthink this moment or try to strategize it. She pours her love out. Everything that she has, the most expensive offering that she can give, she pours it out on the Son of God. This perfume was oil of spikenard. It was very, very expensive. It would have cost the equivalent of a year's salary. So this was a precious oil-based ointment. It was transported in an alabaster box to preserve its fragrance. My aha here was that her actions changed the environment. The smell, the fragrance alone of this costly oil changed what was a familial meal to a moment of worship. It changed the entire atmosphere. It was a moment of breakout. It was an out-of-the-box moment for this woman and even the people who were around. In verses 8 and 9, we see the response of the disciples. The text tells us that they saw it and became indignant. They were unhappy. They took issue with her actions. If you read in St. John chapter 12, verses 4 and 5, this is interesting. Even though Matthew says they became indignant, in John we find out that there was actually an instigator. And the person who took objection and who instigated the outcry was actually Judas. There's always one who's going to raise a stink, and it was Judas who raised the stink. Now, he appears to make this statement out of a concern of being fiscally responsible. Judas is a smart man. We know from John that he is the treasurer. But John also tells us that he is a thief. Yes, this man chosen as a disciple by Jesus, who followed him closely, who was to study Jesus, was a thief. And as income would come in, he would skim off a portion of it and hold it back for himself. So although his stated response appeared noble and fiscally responsible, his care and concern really was not for the poor, but it was rather for himself and that which he would not profit. In verses 10 through 13, we see that Jesus responds. When he hears what's going on, he responds. And his response is basically, chill out. Once again, Jesus does not respond in the way that they would have expected him as their Messiah to respond. This all gets very interesting as you read the account in John. You're going to learn a couple of other things. First of all, Judas is Simon's son. So keep in mind that all of this is happening in his father's house. The way John writes the account, Jesus rebukes Judas in front of everyone in his father's home. And at this dinner, there are at least 15 other people present. You've got the host, Jesus, the 12 disciples, Mary, Martha, Lazarus. There are a lot of people, and here is Judas being rebuked in his father's home. Jesus commands Judas to leave her alone. Who is her? Mary. Mary, the former prostitute. As wonderful as her gesture was, here was this man Judas being critical of a woman based on what he knew about her in her past. He was critical of her because she was once a prostitute. The thief is critical. The now thief is critical of the forgiven prostitute. In Matthew's account, which is our printed text, Jesus asked them, why do you criticize this woman? Why do you trouble her? She's doing a good thing. Jesus did not play into their rules, their traditions, their judgment, or their opinions because they were focused on the wrong things. They valued all of those things more. I had two thoughts about this. The first is that people often criticize others to take the attention away from themselves. As long as the now thief could keep negative attention on a once was prostitute, no one would put themselves in a space to criticize his true motive. The second is a question. How often are we guilty of deciding how God feels about something based on our own personal opinions or our thoughts or our attitudes? And that's exactly what Judas did. He made a valuation or an assessment of how important Mary's actions were based on how he felt that Jesus should respond. In verses 11 through 13, Jesus answers and he says that you're going to have the poor with you always, but I'm not always going to be here. This is going to be an important talk point in your class because what Jesus is not saying here is that we should have no care or concern for the poor. He's basically restating a concept from Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 11. This does not mean that we are supposed to be poor. It doesn't mean that we are to overlook the poor. It also does not mean that we should always anticipate a poverty problem and never worry about finding solutions. But rather what Jesus does here is help them think through how to sort through and prioritize opportunities. My aha here is that this was about focusing on what was really important. Their focus was wrong. In this moment, the focus was all about Jesus and he deserved the best. This was about a unique opportunity. And there are some moments that only happen once in a lifetime. This was not the only moment that they would have to give to or care for the needs of the poor. Those are going to be recurring and ongoing. On the contrary, this moment would never exist again for this woman. She had the opportunity to do something special and loving for her Lord. It was a moment of extravagant love. And he said that she's doing this for my burial. That was a wow. Mary seems to have been listening and she has the best understanding of what's going on and what is to come. And my aha here is that she's used her resources to glorify God now. And my LOL is that the men were wrong, the woman was right. And Jesus celebrated that woman. He says that this will be her legacy. What she did will be remembered. This is the strength of a woman. It would be a memorial, and this woman must be preached, not just in the four walls, but preached in the places that we live, work, and serve. She was an important part of his burial. Her story will be told again and again. And I ask again to you, what is the thing that you're doing that will be remembered? This ends our lesson, but do note again that it is from this event that the betrayal of Jesus flows from. It is here at this setting that the devil is put in Judas's heart to betray Jesus. That is in St. John 13:2. But remember that this embarrassing moment has just happened with Judas in this setting, and this is the stage set for what will come towards the crucifixion of Jesus Christ that sets those things in motion. This is our lesson. Let me give you my key learnings from the week. First, following God is not a one-time magic bean where you go to the altar or get a special prayer or have an emotional experience, but we are in a constant state of being discipled. And we note from Judas that doesn't even mean perfection, but keeping ourselves in a place of continued fellowship, continued learning, continued growth. Next, in the middle of everything going on around us, God is in control. I noted that with Jesus. With everything going on, all of this happened according to the sovereign will and the plan of God. Next, no gift that we give God is ever wasted. That was Judas's issue, the disciples' issue, that this oil, this perfume is being wasted. We could take this money and do something else with it. No gift that you bring to God is ever wasted. We must watch being critical of others because none of us is perfect. And I pointed out that the now thief was critical of a forgiven prostitute. None of us is perfect, so we have to watch how we criticize and how we criticize the gift and offering of others. Next, each of us has a gift that we can offer to God. God deserves our best, not our leftovers. Even with our time, talent, and treasure, He doesn't deserve the time that we have after we finish doing everything else that we want to do. But we should bring the better portion of our gifts and offer them to God. Next, we are to take advantage of opportunities for God that will only come now. There are some things that will only happen once in a lifetime, or there are moments that will appear and they are now moments. And sometimes in those God moments, we have to be open to those moments because we don't get the chance to plan those. We don't get to strategize those, but we must be sensitive to the move and sensitive to know the time and when we are in the midst of a God moment, and be willing to share our gifts even in witnessing. When you see people on your job, people in the store, those are now moments. You may never get that opportunity with that person again. So never be shy about engaging in the now moment in your sharing. Lastly, I ask you, how are you using your resources today? Your gifts, your time, your talent, your treasure to glorify God in the now. That's our lesson for this week. You know how this works. I'm glad that you were here with me, but if you've got things that I did not bring out in my notes, leave me a comment down below because I'm going to add your notes to my notes. And when we get to class on Sunday, we're all going to have bomb notes. Do me a favor, if this video has been helpful, don't forget to give us the thumbs up like. That's all I've got for you this week. Everybody have a super fantastic weekend. I will see you in Sunday school. Bye, everybody.